the big thing for us is understanding which data delivers the best value, because you could take personalization to the nth degree, but it's going to be on a response curve, right? It's going to be a curve of diminishing degrees of return. And so we're trying to work out where is the optimum point for CPG. It won't be the same as it will be in other categories, right? Because people don't expect it and they probably don't want it from us. And so we're trying to find what's the right data to get to the right level of personalization that really drives the business forward in line with our commercials.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, marketing researcher, and entrepreneur, and Chief AI Officer for Claritas. And this is Decoding AI for Marketing. And Greg, if I ask you to think about the innovation in the snack space, what do you think of?
I'm not so sure I would have said a lot, but I will say over the weekend, I actually saw Doritos and Sun Chips, which happens to be a brand I launched 30 years ago, in like Pringle-like cans. I was very excited about that. I thought the Pringles design has come to everyone, I guess. I don't know. But I'm sure there's more. And so, listen, Rex, I think the deal is that while there's been innovation in products, I don't know that I would expect to have seen a ton of innovation in marketing in a category like this, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so there's definitely innovation in this category, but when you think about snack food, all consumer packaged goods, really, there's a lot to be learned from how to better utilize AI. And experimenting with AI to bring CPG into the future has been a big focus of today's guest and the company she works with, Kellanova. You might formerly have known it as Kellogg's, but the company split to two entities last year, and we have a phenomenal AI thought leader with us today.
Yeah, and in fact, last year's CEO CMO Summit for the MMA, Louise Cotterill, who's our guest today, and expert joining us, and she holds the title of Global Senior Director of Full Funnel Marketing in AI and ML at Kellanova. I think that she's really the person, maybe one of the few people I know who has actual AI in their title. That's a huge commitment. We appreciate that. And we can't thank her enough for joining us. So Lou, great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. I've been excited to do this and talk to you guys. So really, really delighted to spend the next sort of 45 minutes talking about what we've been doing and how we can help other brands follow the path.
Yeah, no, and you did such a great job of hitting it out of the park at the summit last year. So we can't thank you. And both Rex and I were like, oh my God, incredible. So I don't know, Rex, where do we want to start? What's our first question here?
I was nodding my head and smiling the whole time watching you present. It was so impressive. And so maybe, tell us about the projects, how you're moving the organization forward, the type of, and also a little bit about some of the struggles you might be seeing.
Yeah, so my role, as you said, is to really look at how in marketing we better use AI, machine learning, deep learning across the whole sort of planning spectrum. And we've centralized that as a process because what we've been able to see is it's possible to quickly scale models once you know that they're working effectively and efficiently. And so my role probably came into effect over 2 years ago, way before ChatGPT was even a thing on the radar. And we've really been working with our regions to understand where are the common problems that they have that we think AI can be a solution for. And I think, Rex, as you talk about what are the key things we need to do, we always have to ground everything in a business-backed problem. If we start with the AI, if we start with a shiny tech object, it never goes very far. But when we root it in a real business problem that has not been able to be solved through conventional methods that we think can provide better efficiency, better effectiveness, more agility in our organization, that's our sweet spots. And that's really where we come into effect. And that's where we've seen great success across all of not just a few markets, but all of our markets, which is fantastic.
Hey Lou, people have to be wondering, how did you get this job? You're not technical by background, just to be clear, right? But did you volunteer?
No, we have a very forward-looking Chief Growth Officer, Charisse Hughes, who is part of the MMA board.
she's amazing. Yeah,
phenomenal.
She's great.
the best. Yeah,
And
really the best.
she
Yeah,
really
phenomenal.
saw this trend coming. She really saw that advanced analytics was going to be a huge powerhouse for our growth. And so she really reassembled the team. I've been lucky enough to be at Kellanova for a very long time. And through my career, I've run through all of the paradigm shifts. I was the first person to join the company with digital in their job title. I was the person who built out RiceKrispies.com, SpecialK.com. We didn't have any websites. I was also the first person to bring in responsive design into websites when mobile became the next paradigm shift. So I've always kind of had careers and jobs really within Kellanova that have always been on the edge of what is the next big thing. And that's where I love to succeed. I love to be where I'm kind of in the gray. I'm a marketing geek. I absolutely love marketing. I could talk about it all day long. But what I love is the pursuit of doing better, right message, right time, right people. And that's always the end goal. And whether it's the internet paradigm, the mobile paradigm, or the new one, which is the AI, that's really where I survive and where I thrive in my job. So yeah, I'm just a geek.
Oh
So
my
how
God,
do you
Rex,
see
Hey,
AI?
Rex, that's why we like her so much, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
She's
of course,
those
yeah. That
those like
energy.
listen, Rex was
Unafraid.
the first guy to measure internet ads ever. I remember I got exposed to the web. I mean, I'm that old. But I remember getting exposed because we invited a guy, we paid him $200 for the afternoon to come in and tell us about this www thing. I mean, that's how the session was described. And I was running an interactive group for Y&R. So yes, we love early. Good. You're one of us. I thought I knew that, but
Unafraid.
now I know for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and
That's right,
unafraid.
yeah.
I like
Unafraid.
that. Okay, go ahead, Rex. Sorry. Yeah.
We like the people that run towards the fire. So, and you have. So tell us a bit about what some of the ways that you see that AI is going to change marketing, and some of your specific research and projects that you feel are already proving out that premise.
Yeah, so the way that we think about AI is really kind of in four categories. We think about it as automated intelligence, we think about it as assisted intelligence, augmented intelligence, and then really autonomous. If you think that really automated is really, I like it sounds, it's automating those routine tasks, and assisted is just helping us make decisions that are quicker and faster and better. That's really where the sweet spot for marketing is right now. It still relies heavily on human work and human minds and human creativity to take it to the final stage. But really what it's doing for our marketing teams is acting like a supercharged assistant. It enables them to sort of take out a lot of the routine and repetitive tasks of their job and focus on building strategy, doing creative work, and really thinking through the next steps. And so it's really exciting for our marketers. I feel as though, when I first started working in online, there was this great promise of the granularity that you could get to, the insights you'd be able to get to, and it's always felt slightly out of reach. And this feels to me the biggest leap that we've made in being able to deliver that. And so we're working very much across the whole spectrum of marketing. We don't just focus on planning or creativity or measurement or activation. And the reason we're doing that is because we really believe that there's no point getting to granular insights if you can't activate them. There's no point activating them if you can't measure them. And that measurement is critical for you to get back those actionable insights. And so we look at tests and experiments across all aspects of marketing. Some are super successful, some are not really successful, but we're luckily in a culture and environment that really thrives in, even with your biggest failure, you have the biggest learning. And so we're able to kind of leap forward every time we do any experiment, good or bad.
Wow, that's interesting. Rex and I have done a lot of research together publicly, and I would totally agree with you that you learn as much, if not more, from the failures that you do from the stuff that you succeed at. Very interesting. So listen, you put a lot of emphasis there. I mean, I've heard you, and I've heard you talk before, a lot of emphasis around sort of measurement. Are you able to articulate at this point how measurement is really going to be better in the age of AI? And that I don't want to limit the question to just what you know today. You're fine to reach into the future a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've lived so much in an era, especially in CPG, where what gets measured gets done. So even if you've wanted to do great personalized work, it's not been enabled because the measurement isn't there to tell you if it worked or not. If I say it all the time with our team, was the juice worth the squeeze? And so I'm really
Yeah.
excited about measurement proving out a lot of the things that we've always thought as marketers were true. A really good example of that is we ran an experiment recently looking at how do you optimize through the funnel. So how do I, as a CPG, I'm really good at optimizing for ROI, but how do I make sure that in the pursuit of short-term ROI, I'm not shortchanging some of my longer-term metrics at the top of the funnel, like awareness and consideration. The part of you in your brain and your heart as a marketer feels, I feel like you should optimize it differently. I feel like the person who doesn't know you, there's got to be some frequency changes in there versus the person who's going to buy you anyway. And so we ran this experiment. What I love about AI is when we run unsupervised models, there's no bias, there's no me in there kind of saying, what about this? What about that? It comes out with the data that comes out. And so when we get the results of that, you do see that it has to change across the funnel. I don't optimize the same way for awareness as I do for loyalty. And what I also see is that different channels will play different roles in that experience. So a Meta plays a different role to a YouTube, plays a different role to a Snap and programmatic. And so that's helping us get better planning. Then that planning then leads into the measurement. So we're not asking channels that aren't able to do the heavy lifting to do things that they can't do and then measure and say they haven't been successful. So, the role that a YouTube plays is very different in our planning to a programmatic media play. So we're not burdening all the channels with the same task because we can now measure them effectively and efficiently through that. So going forward, if I could wave a magic wand, the biggest challenge we have in CPG is that final mile data because we don't control the transaction data. And so feeding in real time what's happened to us, a granularity that we want to know at, that's somewhat out of our scope at the moment, but that's the dream for me, is that there's a continuous feedback and a continuous loop that comes back that tells us real time how we're performing against those metrics. The other thing that I would love to find a solution for is how do we solve for brand health metrics like awareness and consideration, which are always self-reported. And so they're always somewhat overstated, and it's kind of hard to understand whether they're really true or not, and it's a sample size. But finding metrics that are good predictors of those so that we understand how they're shifting over time, that for me is going to be a really important one and something that we'll be looking at later on this year.
Interesting. Well, coming back to the finding that you have different media that perform different roles and that AI helped you unlock that and in a way get more confidence in the team that this is true and we should action on it. Unpack that a little bit more about like which ones did you find work better for awareness versus lower funnel, and why you think that was the case and how AI helped you to discover that or explore that
Yeah, so
further.
it's a really great question. And I think one of the things with the data and why AI was so good is because the traditional way that we'd look at it would be, when it's low dimensional data, and I can easily plot it on a chart and I can see what's happening. AI was great for this because there's probably over 300 different ways we can optimize media. That's not pragmatic to give to any media agency to say there's 300 different ways you can do this. And so what we were able to see with that is the role that Meta plays in reaching different audiences, and the frequency at which we need to hit on it is very different to the way that YouTube works. So what was really exciting for us, and we all know the chart that creativity delivers 49% of effectiveness, consistently creative quality comes across as one of the most important things in YouTube. And the reason that's coming across is because it's such a big, impactful space and it's such a dedicated moment. And so you start to see, again, the really importance of marketers that you've already known, but it's really coming to life and it plays out differently across those different channels. So creativity in YouTube, vital. Meta, actually frequency starts to play more of an important role. So just, again, different strategies for different channels, but really enlightening for our teams.
So then the AI gave you that insight. So you're thinking, okay, now I can go back to the user experience. Someone's scrolling through on Meta's products, Instagram or Facebook. The frequency part is a quick reminder. It's a few milliseconds or a few seconds. And I think that, Greg, you were leading some research with
We did.
Facilis that just took a few milliseconds for people to get the idea and the message.
Se-
And then
seven,
YouTube
ten,
is more of like a Yeah, 7/10 of a
Seven
second.
tenths of a second. 7/10 of a second, the brain made a decision. By the way, the best part about that research, Lou, which you may or may not really appreciate now, but you will when you're, at least my age, if maybe not even Rex's, is that there's no slowing of speed. Wiring is wiring in the brain. It still is fast. It might not feel as fast, by the way, but nonetheless, it is. So yes, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Rex.
Yeah, so that makes sense that why the frequency, because it's more
Mm-hmm.
of a reminder reinforcement message, and then YouTube is more, the pre-roll or something like that in the ad where you have a more dedicated experience. So I understand that. I mean, if you probably could have noodled that through with our old human neural network, what was the big advantage of having machine learning, unsupervised learning, bring that to you? Was it that it was validating and you could find the explanation and people would act on it, or how did it change the organization more than maybe what you had as a theory before
So I
going
think
in?
what it helped prove out is if you think that one of the things we saw is that if you've got great creative, there's a strong correlation between great creative and video completion. Why that's important is because the premium you pay for completed views is probably like a third more than when I leave it just, whether you can skip. So what that tells the organization is I can save you a third on your CPM if you just make sure you air great quality creative. And so instead of it kind of being it's a, market of fact, great quality creative does that, does this, does that, we were able to prove out the value of doing that work and the actual monetary impact it could have on our media buys throughout a year, across a brand, across all the regions. And so that was incredibly helpful. But what it did in terms of why we used AI is because it was, our data science team, it was the first time I'd heard it. And, we always come with the hunger and humility to learn at Kellanova, but it's the curse of dimensionality. We had a huge breadth because we could optimize it in so many different ways, and we couldn't see the patterns with our normal kind of observation kind of approach. And so what it allowed us to do is take years and years of data, performance across multiple brands, and really look for consistent patterns that were coming through at a speed that there was just no way we could have delivered that in the same period of time. And so there were a couple of reasons there. We wouldn't have seen the patterns. We wouldn't have been able to see the things that consistently rose to the top and then tell a story through. And then the speed at which we were able to do it, we're talking like it's a 6-week project as opposed to 3 months, 6 months, 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big problems with measurement that doesn't get talked about. If you get, you might have good insights, but if you don't get them fast enough to act on, it's kind of a so what sort of point. Hey, Lou, let me run something by you, by the way. We used to have a theory in this research that Rex just mentioned we did a number of years ago. It ended up it didn't start out called this. We eventually called it first second strategy, which is what are you doing in the very first second of a video ad in order to be able to capture attention? And it was all about using neuroscience techniques. It was really interesting. In fact, we should talk to you about maybe even looking at a study in that arena. It might be interesting to you. But one of the conclusions we have of that was, I'm going to just go back to a point you made there, that pay for completion was one of the worst deals in all of media. Is that what you found?
I can't say that we did definitely prove that out, but it's potentially a premium you pay for poor quality creative. And that's really not what anyone wants to be producing.
Oh, because you're...
So,
Yeah, which is a good way of looking at it. I mean, and I love the fact that you're putting dollars on a spreadsheet, because that is a really powerful motivator for an organization. It's not just, hey, this is a better idea. It's like, this actually saves a third of our cost. Multiply it out by how much we spend in this area. That's a real number. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to the bottom line. That's stock price value.
I think what I like about that too is that you're really the marketers owning the responsibility for that time that you have with the consumer. I've seen a lot of marketers, Rex and I have been through this, where marketers will blame the publisher, and I'm like, I don't think that's where the responsibility lies. Once the publisher turns over an audience to an ad, which is in essence what happens, then it's really the marketer's responsibility to follow through at that point and sort of continue to capture attention and create a compelling story.
I mean, we're a big believer of, you get the work you brief. And so it all starts with those great insights that lead you to those great briefs. It's something we're spending a lot of time on to make sure we build up that capability. And then something like, how do you change a brief to excite a data scientist, which is different to a creative team? And then how do you find that perfect blend between the two so that they're working in an augmented way as opposed to in silos. So yeah, no, we're a big believer. It's our responsibility.
Hey, there's an interesting question you just kind of pointed out there too. If you can spend a little time here, and I don't need confidential information, but what is some of your different thinking on what the organization and/or capability requirements might need in this new age? I mean, listen, it's early, so we wouldn't hold you to it. I mean, but I'm curious what your kind of early thinking is around that.
I think the big thing that works really well for us is when we work with teams who are comfortable in the grey, because exactly what you said, it's early, it's unknown, and they have to be comfortable with taking some risks. And so we're looking at, I work best with teams in the different markets who are kind of like up for a challenge. I can tell you that, we worked recently on a project with a clean room, deploying high value audiences across different channels. The bits we thought were going to be hard were not the bits that were hard. And so we really had to get a team of people who, it could have been so easy to have cancelled the project and said, we're not going to go ahead with it. But they had to work and work and work to make this kind of project sort of go ahead. And once we got it out the door, it was so insightful and so useful to our organization. So people who have that mental capacity to operate in the grey and want to lean into that space.
Well, let me shift gears to the part around the clean room, audience discovery, the role of AI, because one of the promises is that the ability to find these micro segments or to organize audiences in different ways that you haven't thought of, instead of sticking with the general moms of Gen Z kids who are the primary grocery shoppers. You can find all this nuance of sometimes it's dad, sometimes it's the kid, who, all these different intersections. What have you found useful with AI? Have you found it useful? And what was your journey to get there?
Yeah, so we ran a test last year. We've got more tests running this year, leveraging a clean room. Traditionally, in some of our markets, they're still using demo plus maybe platform interests to target. And what we wanted to do is kind of like exactly your point, like how do we get more insightful? How do we have less wastage in the story? And so through a clean room provider, we were able to bring together these multiple data sets. So we could look at purchase behavior, lifestyle, attitudinal data, and bring them together in an addressable market. So I think the data set we had was something in the region like 40% of the market. So a huge number of records that we were working with, totally different to anything else that we normally see in terms of that size and scale. And so what we were able to do is use kind of a clustering, neural networks, random forest, to really look at who are the groups who are most receptive to our audience. But then in addition to that, who are those that are not going to convert? No matter what I do, they're too loyal to another brand. Or at the same vein, who are those people who are going to buy me anyway? So it's a wasted impression. I don't need to serve them an ad because they're already going to be at the store. They love us that much, they're going to buy it. So we were really selective and able to deploy those audiences. What we could see in the groups that we kind of identified as high value is that there were different subsegments within them, and they weren't necessarily bound by age. They were bound by interests or certain price sensitivities or things like that. We then tailored the creative to speak to those, to either address the barrier that we had or to look at the opportunity that we could exploit within that. So we had customized creative against each of those clusters. We then deployed that across Meta, DV360, Snap, and then we partnered with a retailer, so we had completely closed loop measurement. So we could see unequivocally if someone had seen my ad, I knew it had driven them to a purchase or not. Now, if you could imagine that as a marketer, right, who so often we live with MMM models who, carry in generalities and things like that. But I know specifically this cluster, this group bought it because of my advertising. Was unbelievable. We were like beyond excited with that. And the other piece that was really interesting for our analysis, if you look at any good marketing segmentation, you've obviously got your strategic target, a creative target. They don't always translate into activation targets because the data used for strategic target isn't necessarily buyable in media. We were able to get to much more closer to that strategic target. But then what we were able to do is actually identify new audiences that perhaps we hadn't seen before. A good example is that in this particular market, post-COVID, with rising interest rates, with cost of living inflation, we'd seen a huge swathe of the population, a third, move back home with their parents. We were not talking to them because they were not buying anymore. They were back home with their parents for a reason. Their parents were buying the food. And so with our targeting, we were like, well, let's not talk to those parents because they've not an interest. But actually, if we could dual target, we worked really, really successfully together. And you could see that play out in the retailer clean room, where we could see where within the household the people had been targeted, and we could see the uplift in that particular group where there was a presence of an adult in a household. So super interesting, and the granularity was just, superb for our teams.
Lou, this is really going to be, I don't like to do kind of hero worship podcasts, but I feel like we're doing that with you. At least that's my inside voice. It's unbelievable how much you've thought this through. Rex, listen, you've done probably more measurement attribution studies than anybody, obviously, having run Marketing Evolution. Lou's right there at the top of people who are really being thoughtful about this, right? I mean, she just explained movable middles. There's so few people that understand the concepts of what you just articulated, Lou. I can't. I'm sort of awestruck here.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, especially in CPG. I mean, the challenge
Especially.
that you have is that I've seen phenomenal marketers in financial services and telecommunications and so forth because they have all this data. They know who their customer is, and it's a recurring relationship. Your category has been plagued by the challenge of not knowing what happens in the retail channel because somebody else owns that data. And you worked through that. You pushed through it to get to 40% of the population to where you have visibility from beginning to end, and you're using a control group so you can calculate the uplift, and you're using AI to find new insights, and then you're activating on it, and you're getting the data back in a relatively quick period of time so you can keep turning. This is the best. This is a gold standard. This is a best practice of what people need to do. So my question now is, what do you do next? What do you feel like is the next thing that brings it to the next level using AI and machine learning and so forth? Is it just speeding up the machine, or is it now feeding this data back into AI generated briefs and messages, or is it, some other direction?
Yeah, so I think the big thing for us is understanding which data delivers the best value, because you could take personalization to the nth degree, but it's going to be on a response curve, right? It's going to be a curve of diminishing degrees of return. And so we're trying to work out where is the optimum point for CPG. It won't be the same as it will be in other categories, right? Because people don't expect it and they probably don't want it from us. And so we're trying to find what's the right data to get to the right level of personalization that really drives the business forward in line with our commercials. That's a really important part for us as well, is that it's very easy to, run amok with any of these kind of things just because you can, but you've got to keep it true to what your business proposition is and true to making sure that you're driving the business as well. So that's a really important part for us. Just because I can enrich my 1P data with 2,000 attributes doesn't mean it's worth it. Just because there's 2,000 attributes, it doesn't mean they're all worth the same value to me. I might need to know 5. And so that's a really important part for us, is to understand that piece. We are getting quicker. I can tell you the first one took us much longer than the second and the third one will take. We're also getting a lot smarter with those briefs. We're definitely not there to Gen AI briefs, but we're getting much closer in terms of being very specific on what we want to do. And some of that goes into some of the work we're doing around planning as well. I personally think one of the biggest challenges that advertising has got is that people ask too much of it. People ask it to improve 10 things when really it should really be lifting one of those or 2 of those. And you should be looking across the 4 Ps to help with some of those other problems or work in conjunction with advertising. And so we're getting really tight on really identifying what is the problem that advertising needs to solve, as opposed to maybe PPA, as opposed to distribution. Because I can't solve a problem if it's a distribution issue. National ad isn't going to save you. And so we're really trying to make sure that our planning and our briefs are really spot on. So that's not yet gone to a machine yet. But it is, some of the stuff we have seen has enabled us to take down some of the boundaries across the different commercial silos. So the insights that we gleaned from the retailer clean room analysis has fed back into our sales team. played a huge part in us understanding the role that private label plays against our products, and how we've got a really strong story for a lot of retailers based on what we saw in that analysis. And so we're breaking down those stories and breaking down those walls that have historically held across marketing, sales, RGM, and really trying to unlocking that so that we can create, again, this central brain that drives a lot of our decision making.
Hey Lou, what are listen? I don't imagine if you want to talk about companies, that's fine. We're okay with that. But maybe if you want to just go to like specific tools that you're using in house, like where are you finding kind of interest in? Like what's kind of kept your attention of late?
So we do a hybrid approach. So we leverage where we can in-house tools, but where it doesn't fit with our core capabilities, we make great tasting snacks, right? We build amazing brands, but keeping data safe is not our core competency. And so we want to work with the best of the best when we do that. And so when it comes to certain projects, we outsource because we know that we want to be able to keep up with changing technology, want to keep up with changing privacy rules and things like that. So it really take it on a project by project basis. In terms of where I'm personally kind of geeking out at the moment, it's really around the creative tools. Is it creative to augment our sort of current talent pools? Is it democratizing creativity across different teams? Is it about, forward looking? What does that enrichment look like in terms of the, VR and things like that? I'm really interested in where that's going to take us and how that's going to enable us to do more personalization, because we can do it more quickly, we can do it more accurately, and without the cost of potentially, making a mistake and then having to reshoot something all over again. And so that's my kind of low personal passion point at the moment, because I think that has a huge potential to disrupt and really unlock a lot of potential for us where we're headed.
Well, certainly SOAR last week kind of give us a bigger, talk about a giant, like if you're not, if you weren't excited before, you got to be really excited now.
Right. And my experience has been with so much of these that the proof is in the practical application. So, if anyone's used the DALL-E or Midjourney or any of that, when you actually get into it and try and do it practically for your work, it's fun trying it and doing it. It's amazing. But when I try and actually use it for work, it's not quite there yet. And so I take a very pragmatic, because I can get very giddy and very excited about the potential. And then what I don't want to do is then have my bubble burst. And so understanding how we stair-step our way into those sort of applications, those tools, is a really important project for me this year.
Let me ask you one more question on that. This is a big one. How far away are we from full-on generative AI creative being developed on the fly? So let's assume, Rex and I have been running this series of this Consortium for AI Personalization Studies, and, there's unbelievable value. It's the greatest value I've ever seen created in as simple a process as we're seeing these Consortium for AI Personalization. But listen, we're contained creative then. We're developing that. It's like advanced DCO on the creative level at some level. Although the last campaign Rex did, I think, Rex, 700 ads were produced on that.
Yeah, I've seen a few in the thousands. But yeah, to your point.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But what about full-on generative? Where are we? Because, listen, corporations, I don't think are ready for that. They're certainly not going to be interested in it in time. But that's got to be the answer someday. The ads are created on the fly.
I think it's always going to depend on what we're kind of talking about, what level of ad. I think the creative human ingenuity is always going to play a part in that. So these big ideas that really disrupt categories, I think are always going to come from people. And they might be sped up. They might have bigger breadth because of that. The smaller iterations where I'm trying to do a disposable content that's going to be consumed in 0.7 of a second, yes, I probably could see generative AI taking more of a role in that. But the big ideas, the real breakthrough, that's still, for us, going to lie squarely with the people who help us build those ideas.
We'll revisit with you in a year and see.
Exactly. I want to see. It's probably a leap forward. Wait, one more, Rex, if I can. Just really quick. Have you seen a generative AI tool? Because, listen, as the MMA, I have a lot less risk. I've been asking around for somebody to run full-on generative AI creative, just have it developed on the fly to see what happens? Because I can absorb that kind of risk. I'm not a Kellanova or GM or any big company, which has a whole different dynamic. You seen anybody close?
No, what I have seen though that I think is interesting is some of the work that's going on around pre-testing, and that pre-testing potentially using synthetic data to better predict what's going to happen with your ad.
Okay.
But then what's really interesting for me is in order for them to build that prediction, they're breaking down your ad into text, and breaking it down into text suddenly translates into prompts. And so that for me is a really interesting kind of area that, we might be interested to understand where that develops more. But no, I haven't seen anyone who's doing it on the fly yet.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm heading down to a university to meet with a professor who's working on the end-to-end loop. And I think you're right. There's a computer vision component where we're pulling apart the features of an ad and characterizing what they are, labeling them, and then providing the percentage difference of having your logo on the left side versus the middle versus the right size of it, different things like that. But that does begin to build a database, as you said, that could be used for prompting and go back. So we can see the primordial soup beginning to bubble up a few interesting things that should become workflows in the future. I think my question for you is even broader than that, which is you look at AI and take it a step further. If you really sit with deeper consumer insights, and you're in the snack category, at what point does marketing begin to break the walls and silos of marketing and help really drive product innovation? Because probably one of the trends you're seeing, like you said, the Gen Zs coming back to home to be with parents, more living with them longer. That's partially driven by housing costs, a pandemic, lots of things. You're also seeing increases in autoimmune disease. I have a son that has food allergies that are pretty serious. So we are very loyal to certain brands that we know do a great job with that. How do you see marketing's potentially owning that customer insight and then driving the whole organization, the supply chain, the innovation agenda, et cetera? Is that on the plate for you, or is that off the
No,
menu?
it's absolutely within our team. And in fact, within my global organization, research and development sits under Charisse as well. So we're pretty well connected as it goes through. I would say that certainly in Kellanova, marketing does dictate a lot of the innovation. So it is one of the roles that fits underneath our marketing org. But the way that we test, the way that we predict, I think is going to change dramatically. The ability to, translate unstructured data and, better forecast, as opposed to the way we traditionally test new food concepts or something like that, fill in this form, tell me what you thought. The ability to people to talk real time, to do facial coding, to really look at those kind of areas and understand, and then translate that back into a prediction model is going to be really interesting for us. The ability as well to do that at a large scale, because often food development it's costly. You have to make sure you have a solid bet, but you're still testing it normally on a panel of people. And so even though the best interest in the world that you try to make sure there's no bias in that panel, that it's a fair and representative sample, it's still a sample. And so the more people we can get, the quicker and easier it is to do that testing, the more we can get confidence in that. I think the cost of innovation will go down, and we'll see more innovation start to happen in our organization because we can better predict those big bets and we can better target where they need to be. We've got brands that make absolute sense to be in every single retailer, right? We want them on every shelf in every retailer. But we also know that in some retailers, in some regions, it doesn't make sense to have them there, whether that's the socioeconomic, whether that's the cultural connections within those regions. We want the ability to innovate for those areas and sell in those areas and not be constrained to something that's a national kind of campaign. And so I think innovation is ripe for transformation. It's going to be an exciting place to look at where we go and hopefully see more innovation in CPG.
That's great. I love the localization and the personalization that path that you're thinking of, because I think that we are seeing this overall pattern where we can begin to get to know people better. And to your point, the whole notion of national versus local might really shift to become much more local, and even within local, micro
Right?
local. But it has huge implications to your supply chain, distribution, sourcing, marketing, communication, and so forth. And maybe you probably do sit at the best place to be able to help sort that out, because AI can help us with the complexity of those trade-offs and decision making. So I'm really excited to see what you do in
Yeah,
that
and,
area.
and and our marketing teams always want to think of themselves as, really the drivers of growth. And so we want a seat at the table with all of those teams, right? And that doesn't mean we're making the decisions, but we want to be able to use the data we've got and the insights we've got to help them better deliver on what our consumers want. And that's our number one thing. We're put people at the heart of our brand building, and then really you can't go that far wrong.
Is there anything that you think is kind of truly overhyped at this point, Lou? Anything you're like, I don't know, I'm just not so sure. It'll be a good gauntlet to throw down out there to the world and listeners at large to come back and say, no, we're not looking at this right.
I do think there's generally, I think, the omnipotence of AI makes it feel like it's the solution for everything. And I don't think it is. Right now, it's still a tool. We're not all the way into the, fifth industrial revolution where it's fully autonomous and running without us. So I think, a lot of it is looking through the hype and looking at where does it have a practical application. And so there isn't a specific area that I kind of go, oh, that's just not possible. But I do take everything we do with a pinch of salt and kind of go, okay, how is that actually going to work? How are we actually going to apply that in our brand? And how are we actually going to activate and do something meaningfully different? When we've run tests before that haven't been successful, we've, again, like I kind of said at the start, we started with the tool. And what happened, this was looking at a segmentation. Is there a different way to do segmentation? Could we do it with AI? Is it going to bring us new insights that possibly we've never seen before? And we ran it and we were really delighted with the results, except it gave us exactly the same results that we'd used using traditional methodology. And so it wasn't the right tool and it wasn't the right time. And so, yes, you can spend a lot of time in there, but you've also got to be pragmatic about what your business goals are and what you've already got and where your business needs to be to make sure you're using it effectively and efficiently, I'd say.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful place for us to wrap the conversation up with. And we would love to have you back. And
Yes.
especially as you get to the part where you talked about the first kind of assisted AI, AI versions and augmented AI, but we didn't really talk about fully the autonomous part. And the question is, will we be able to have that conversation in a year or maybe sooner? So we will have you back for that. But that's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
And I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, and rate and review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.